You think there are certain ages when a woman suddenly needs a man more than ever, but what you're really seeing is not age, it's pressure, it's loneliness, it's uncertainty. And if you don't understand the difference, you will spend your whole life misreading people and mismanaging yourself. You think the number is the story, but the number is rarely the story. The story is what that season exposes. The story is what fear starts whispering when time moves. Options shift, life gets real, and the fantasy of I'll figure it out later finally expires. That is where people get desperate. That is where people settle. That is where people confuse emotional hunger with love. And before we go any further, subscribe to this channel. Not because I need your click, but because you need reminders. You need something stronger than your moods. You need clarity when your emotions start rewriting reality. You need truth when loneliness tries to convince you that any attention is better than no attention. Subscribe if you are serious about self respect, discipline, and learning how to see people and patterns without lying to yourself. Here's what this really means. The phrase the ages when women need a man most sounds simple, but the truth is deeper and a lot less comfortable. What people often call needing someone is usually a collision between inner instability and external pressure. It is not about gender as much as it is about human nature. It is about what happens when identity is weak, when time feels loud, when silence gets heavy, and when a person has not built enough internal structure to stand inside their own life without reaching for somebody else to carry the weight. That is the thesis. Not age is biology, age is exposure, age is pressure, age is a mirror. Because there are 3 seasons where this need gets loud, and if you are not disciplined, you will misunderstand every one of them. The first age is the age of insecurity. That early adult season where attention feels like value, where being chosen feels like proof, where chemistry gets mistaken for compatibility, and where the ego is still too fragile to separate attraction from alignment. This is the age where people often say they want love, but what they really want is validation. They want to feel desirable. They want to feel ahead. They want to feel like they matter. And when a person has not built real self respect, they become vulnerable to anything that looks like certainty. That's the misconception. They think they need a partner. What they actually need is identity. Without identity, attention becomes addictive. A text becomes relief. A compliment becomes oxygen. A relationship becomes a mirror that tells them who they are. And the second you need another person to tell you that you are enough, you stop choosing carefully. You start reaching. You start performing. You start editing yourself for approval. You stop asking, is this right for my life? And start asking, how do I keep this person interested? That's called externalized worth. And externalized worth is dangerous because it makes you cheap, not in value, in behavior. You start bargaining with your standards. You tolerate inconsistency because you are afraid of silence. You tolerate disrespect because you are afraid of losing access. You tolerate confusion because clarity might end the fantasy. You stop being centered. You start being reactive. You stop building your life. You start orbiting somebody else's mood. That first age is not about needing a man. It is about needing a mirror because you have not become solid enough to stand without one. The second age is the age of pressure. This is when life starts asking harder questions. Time feels louder, family expectations get louder, social comparison gets louder. The gap between the life someone imagined and the life they are actually living becomes harder to ignore. And now the desire for connection is no longer just emotional. It becomes practical, symbolic, existential. People start measuring themselves against timelines, against peers, against photos, against milestones. And suddenly, companionship is not just companionship, it becomes evidence. Evidence that they are not behind, evidence that they are still wanted, evidence that life is still on track. This is where people make some of the worst decisions of their lives because pressure does not create wisdom. Pressure exposes weakness. Pressure speeds up denial. Pressure makes people romanticize what they would normally reject. They say yes too fast. They ignore red flags. They overvalue comfort. They call it maturity. They call it timing. They call it fate. No. Most of the time, it is fear wearing formal clothes. That's called panic attachment. Panic attachment is when someone does not choose from peace, they choose from urgency. They do not ask, does this person align with my values? They ask, can this person save me from the discomfort of uncertainty? They do not want partnership. They want relief. Relief from the pressure of not knowing. Relief from the embarrassment of comparison. Relief from the ache of feeling left behind. And when you choose for relief, you pay later with regret. Because anything built on urgency will eventually demand a price. You wake up next to someone you never deeply respected. You tie your future to a pattern you never truly examined. You lose years trying to make peace with a decision you made from fear. And then people say, I thought this was what I needed. No, it was what your anxiety wanted. Your discipline was never consulted. Read that carefully. Your anxiety wanted it. Your discipline was never consulted. The third age is the age of reckoning. This is the season where illusion starts dying. The season where the room gets quieter, the image matters less, and a person comes face to face with the life they actually built inside themselves. Maybe they have been through relationships. Maybe they have had success. Maybe they have had attention, options, movement, noise. But now the question changes. Now it is not, can I attract someone? It is, can I live with myself in peace? It is not, do people want me? It is, do I know how to give and receive truth? It is not, can I avoid being alone? It is, have I become someone I can trust when I am alone? This age is brutal for people who built their life outward first and inward never. Because eventually charm fades as a strategy, beauty fades as a strategy, status fades as a strategy, performance fades as a strategy. And what remains? Character, emotional regulation, presence, honesty, self command, the ability to sit in silence without collapsing, the ability to be with another person without using them as anesthesia for your unresolved self. This is the age where many people finally feel the need for someone most intensely, not because they are weak, but because distractions stop working, the noise dies down, the social theater loses its power, and they begin to realize that connection cannot save a person who never learned inner stability. That is the hard truth. People do not suffer most from being alone. They suffer from meeting themselves without preparation. So, what is the root cause beneath all three ages? The same root: dependency on the outside to regulate the inside. That's it. Different stage, same wound. Insecurity says, choose me so I can feel enough. Pressure says, stay with me so I can feel safe. Reckoning says, don't leave me alone with myself. Different words, same dependence. And when dependence leads, consequences follow. You over pursue, you over talk, you overshare, you over invest in people who have not earned access to your inner life. You start treating attention like nourishment when it is often just stimulation. You start calling your cravings intuition. You start confusing intensity with meaning. You start building relationships not from mutual, but from mutual avoidance. One person avoiding loneliness, another avoiding accountability, one person chasing certainty, another person enjoying control, and everybody calls it connection. That's not connection. That's compensation. Compensation is when you use a relationship to patch what your character should have built. And compensation always leaks. Always. Because the other person cannot permanently carry what you refuse to develop. Not your self worth, not your emotional discipline, not your standards, not your purpose, not your peace. This is why silence matters. This is why distance matters. This is why detachment matters. Not as manipulation, not as punishment, as information, as correction, as self respect. When somebody pulls back, when life gets quiet, when attention disappears, you find out fast whether your life has a center. You find out whether you are anchored or addicted. You find out whether you have built enough within yourself, clear when nobody is clapping, texting, validating, or choosing you. Silence is not always rejection. Sometimes silence is revelation. It reveals what you have been using people for. It reveals what fantasies you still serve. It reveals how quickly you abandon your standards when you fear being alone. It reveals whether your confidence is real or rented. And this is where the reframe begins. The question is not at what age do women need a man most? The better question is at what stage do people most need to build themselves so they stop turning relationships into rescue missions? That is the real conversation. That is the mature conversation. That is the conversation people avoid because it removes their favorite excuse. Because once you tell the truth, you lose the right to stay passive. You stop blaming age. You stop blaming timing. You stop blaming modern dating. You stop blaming other people for seeing the desperation you refuse to confront. You start building. You build standards that work even when you feel lonely. You build routines that keep your mind clean when emotions get loud. You build a body that can hold stress without collapsing into impulse. You build work that gives your life direction. You build friendships that are rooted in truth, not convenience. You build a relationship with solitude so strong that you stop treating every new person like a lifeboat. That is power, quiet power, unshakable power. And let me show you the archetype. The person who understands all of this, the person who no longer gets played by age, pressure, or fantasy. This person walks into a room without needing to be chosen. They are not cold. They are not arrogant. They are simply anchored. They do not panic when connection appears, and they do not panic when connection disappears. They are focused, grounded, disciplined, self respecting. They do not hand over emotional authority because somebody is attractive, charming, accomplished, or available at the right moment. They watch patterns. They listen to behavior. They let time reveal truth. This person does not beg for consistency, they require it. They do not chase clarity, they speak it. They do not romanticize mixed signals, they read them accurately. They do not use relationships to escape themselves. They enter relationships from fullness, not famine. When silence comes, they do not spiral, they reflect. When distance appears, they do not perform, they observe. When pressure rises, they do not rush. They tighten discipline. When loneliness hits, they do not settle, they strengthen. That is the person you need to become. So, what do you do now? You stop glorifying need. You stop making desperation look poetic. You stop calling dependency devotion. You stop admiring people for how intensely they attach when that attachment is clearly built on fear. You stop feeding fantasies about being the one who saves, fixes, completes, or finally proves somebody's worth. That is not love. That is ego mixed with immaturity. You start asking better questions. Does this connection make me clearer or more confused? Does this person bring peace or just stimulation? Am I acting from alignment or from fear of being alone? Am I pursuing this because it is right or because it is available during a season where I feel weak? You need those questions. You need them badly. Because emotions without examination will lead you straight into self betrayal. Redirect your energy back to your habits, back to your health, back to your purpose, back to your standards, back to the uncomfortable work of becoming someone whose life is not built around emotional emergencies. Train your mind to tell the truth faster. Train your mouth to say less when you are tempted to chase. Train your body to stay still when anxiety wants movement. Train your attention to return to your mission instead of wandering into fantasies about who might complete you. You do not need more seduction. You need more structure. You do not need more options. You need more discernment. You do not need more chemistry. You need more character. You do not need to become harder. You need to become cleaner. Cleaner standards, cleaner motives, cleaner boundaries, cleaner choices. Because the real danger is not that somebody needs somebody at a certain age. The real danger is that they do not know why. And when you do not know why you want what you want, you become easy to control, easy to flatter, easy to distract, easy to derail. But when you understand the pattern, you become difficult to manipulate because you are no longer nego, tieting with your own emptiness. That is the shift. You stop asking, "Who do I need?" You start asking, "Who am I becoming?" You stop asking, "Who will stay?" You start asking, "What do I tolerate when I forget my worth?" You stop asking, "When will somebody arrive?" You start asking, "Why would I build a life that depends on rescue?" That shift changes everything. So, yes, there are seasons when people feel the need for connection more intensely. The age of insecurity, the age of pressure, the age of reckoning. But none of those seasons are solved by blindly reaching for another person. They are solved by truth, discipline, self respect, and the courage to build a life that does not collapse in the absence of attention. You do not need to fear those seasons. You need to prepare for them. You need to become the kind of person who can feel loneliness without obeying it, feel attraction without worshiping it, feel pressure without surrendering to it, and feel silence without turning it into a crisis. That is maturity. That is self command. That is freedom. And once you get that, everything changes. You stop being available for half love. You stop being seduced by urgency. You stop interpreting every emotional spike as destiny. You stop outsourcing your peace. You stop asking relationships to do the work your character has been avoiding. You become solid. And when you become solid, you no longer move like someone looking to be rescued. You move like someone who can build, choose, receive, and walk away if necessary. You move like someone who values truth more than fantasy. You move like someone who understands that love is not supposed to replace your center. It is supposed to meet you there. Remember that. Not replace your center. Meet you there. So the next time you hear someone talk about the age when a woman needs a man most, hear it correctly. What they are really talking about is the age when people feel themselves most intensely, the age when unresolved insecurity gets loud, the age when social pressure gets loud, the age when inner emptiness gets loud. And your job is not to exploit that, fear that, or romanticize that. Your job is to rise above it. You are not here to become someone's crutch. You are not here to search for a crutch. You are here to become so grounded that connection becomes a choice, not a survival strategy. You are not waiting for the answer. You are the answer. Act like it. Build like it. Protect your peace like it. Carry yourself like someone who knows that no age, no season, no silence has the right to turn you against your own standards. Let other people be ruled by urgency if they want. You choose discipline. You choose truth. You choose self respect. And that choice will save you from years of confusion, compromise, and quiet regret. If this is the kind of truth you need in your life, subscribe now. Stay here for clarity, for growth, for the reminders that keep you centered when the world gets noisy and your emotions get reckless. This is for people who want more than attention, more than fantasy, more than temporary relief. This is for people who want strength, standards, and a life built on something real.